Up through 2018, we planted ball and burlap trees, which, you've seen, pretty big ball, burlap wrapped. There are many municipalities that plant bare root trees, so they're delivered with no root, not no root. There's no dirt within the root system. There's bare roots. Before I embarrass myself at all, I'm going to bring Ben up here, and he's going to explain that to you a little better. But I just really emphasize, this really came out of our ability this year to really take a step back and evaluate those forestry operations, really take a very close look at what we can do more efficiently, how we can utilize those resources better. And so we wanted to put this in front of you and make sure that you understand that this is something we're looking at doing for lots of reasons, but not the least of which is that the trees are going to look a bit different to the residents. The process is going to be a bit different. And we want to make sure that you understand that process, and we want to be able to then effectively communicate it to the residents. So, I'm really very excited about this opportunity to change up our operations.
Before you go, is there anything in the EAB study that may also alter process operations? And the reason I ask is one of the things is when they chop the trees down that are EPA potentially affected. When I was reading the update in 2015 from DNR, they were talking about doing it, you can't do it in certain months because they don't want you to haul it away when it's active. But anyways, is there any way that would affect once those results come in?
I don't believe so. What I believe you're referring to, in the past, they would have county quarantines so that you couldn't move EAB-infected wood across county lines. That quarantine currently is effectively void because EAB has been confirmed in every county in the state of Wisconsin. So there's no issue with moving it across county lines because you're not infecting a previously uninfected county.
We just had like a harvest season. I don't think it was quarantine, but okay. As long as you're sure there's nothing would affect our program.
Okay. You want to give a little overview?
Thank you for having me. So when I took over as services foreman earlier this year, I kind of took a look at how we do things, and having worked with forestry crews for the past year, I looked at what are the things that we're struggling with the most, and what can we do to try and make some little tweaks that aren't going to cost too much, but will change it, alter our ability or enhance our ability to fulfill our responsibilities throughout the year. One of those things that I noticed we struggled with in the past was planting all of our trees in a timely manner. Traditionally we've been, for every tree we cut down, we've been putting one tree back, which is I think what most of the residents that I talk to are expecting. But our old process, we would use ball and burlap trees. They're relatively expensive. You're talking about anywhere between $150 and $220, and that's our wholesale price per tree, and then we have to pay for a semi-truck to bring them to us. So they're relatively heavy from a shipping standpoint, a shipping cost standpoint, and then once our staff has to plant them, we have to take them from the yard to the planting location, muscle them into place, and then the root ball is encased by a wire basket in burlap that has to be removed once the tree is in place. So it's a labor-intensive process. It's kind of slow. It involves a lot of muscle. And then one of the fundamental factors behind ball and burlap trees is that they're produced by using a tree spade to dig the tree out of the ground, and then it's placed inside a burlap bag. In doing so, you remove approximately 90% of the roots of the tree. And that translates into a much longer period of establishment. So it's a slower way to go. It's just kind of the way things are done. They're easy to transport logistically, but it's very heavy, and the trees take a long time to recover. When I kind of looked at this, I started looking around at how can we make this faster, how can we make this a little cheaper and easier on our staff and our equipment. So I have a background in the nursery industry, and so nurseries purchase bare root trees, Bare root trees are produced by a special machine scoops them out of the ground and shakes the dirt off. So instead of cutting the tree out of the ground, we're shaking the dirt off. So you preserve most of that root system that is lost in the process of producing a ball and burlap tree. When you do that, you reduce the transplant shock. So there's always going to be some transplant shock and an establishment period involved with moving any tree at any time. But when you lift them out of the ground and shake the dirt off, you're preserving a lot more of that fibrous root system. The trees then are very lightweight, cheap to ship. The cost is typically somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of what a ball and burlap tree costs. So you're looking at cost savings there, not only for the tree, but for the shipping. What?
Is the survival rate better too?
Because that's also a very interesting issue. When you're not cutting off that many roots of the tree, the fibrous root system is preserved, and you get that in the soil, and as long as you have the proper soil temperature and aftercare, you get a much faster establishment, which leads to long-term success. Quicker establishment definitely enhances the long-term success of the tree. It also gives us the opportunity to correct flaws in the root system at the time of planting. With a ball and burlap tree, you can't see the root system, so if there are girdling roots or any problems in there, there's nothing you can do to stop it. With a bare root tree, if we see that a root has wrapped around the trunk, we have the opportunity to correct that, straighten it out, or cut it off. Therefore, preventing long-term failure due to girdling roots, which is a major problem with a lot of our older trees in Shorewood. It's one of the key factors in mortality. So I kind of started asking around various different municipalities around the state, like how did switching over to bare root work for them? And I talked to a number of different people. And the key thing that they told me was there's this concept of a gravel bed. So we would be looking at getting a truckload of bare root trees in the springtime, and they all need to be planted very quickly because they can't be dry and they can't be hot. The way to get past that, give ourselves a little more time to deal with things, is to construct a gravel bed. Basically, these bare root trees are planted in pea gravel, where and then throughout the course of summer, this would be in the service yard. They're planted in pea gravel, and throughout the course of the summer, they're watered by an automatic irrigation system. What this does is that it beefs up the root system. Gives us, we get a really nice enhancement of the root system, and there's some pictures.
Yep, there were pictures in the packet.
This gives us the opportunity to, number one, make sure that the tree is in good condition and survivable. Throughout the course of the summer, it will leaf out, it will be able to see that it's definitely worth taking the time to go put it out in the field. You get, in most cases, a really nice enhancement of the root system. It allows us to hold the tree over into the months of September and October. When the soil temperatures go down, the nighttime temperatures go down, we have more dependable precipitation. What that does is increases our transplant success substantially. Physically, the planting of bare root trees is very easy for the staff and the equipment. It's a faster process. We have three of the three frontline forestry staff have all worked with bare root trees in the past. Just talking to them, their expectation is that they can plant anywhere between 12 and 15 trees per day, bare root, whereas the ball and burlap stock, you're looking at 5 to 7. So you're looking at expediting the planting process, getting things done a lot quicker, and then we expect to have an improvement in our long-term success of the tree after planting. The other thing this allows us to do is be a little bit more selective and have access to a greater diversity of tree selections going forward, which is one of the major factors that we have in our mature tree stock, is that there's like 5 or 6 different trees that you see around the village, and each year they would replace that with a selection of 5 or 6 different trees going forward. But with bare root, I expect to be able to put 12 to 15 different cultivars in the ground across a larger array of genera, which is recognized going forward as the best management practice, is to increase our diversity. So the switch to bare root will also allow us to more quickly increase our diversity without spending a whole lot of extra money on it.
How much is the gravel pit or the gravel farm box?
Looking at cost, I'm looking at cost analysis from other municipalities. Probably, based on what I want to do, somewhere in the $2,000 to $3,000 range. We were looking at basically building a large wooden box and then filling it with pea gravel, and then purchasing some drip irrigation equipment to keep the trees wet throughout the course of the summer.
And there's no plumbing needed, I mean, you have everything in place?
Yeah, we have been constructing this right next to our upper service garage. It'll be a simple and easy process to run a water line through the outside. Previously, the ball and burlap trees were held in that same area and watered by a very similar system. This one would just be a little bit more permanent.
And they're fine being out in the cold and all that stuff. So you're looking at, for next year, 2020, like a $3,000, $4,000 investment,
Most likely, yeah.
and then the trees?
Correct.
Yeah, and we may be able to use some materials that we have on hand. I haven't gone, really deeply in depth with the actual construction of the box yet.
Trustee Warner?
How are these transported? How do you get, are they just the bare root in a bag, or how do they come to you?
How do they come to us? They would come to us on a refrigerated truck, usually tied into bundles, and then often, a lot of times they'll be packed in like peat moss or straw or something. The big thing is that they stay cool, they're not in direct sunlight, and that the roots stay moist.
Trustee Warner?
This may be kind of a silly question, but I know that the diameter is much smaller for the bare wood trees, and stakes are required for them. Are they going to be significantly shorter than the other types of trees that we've been using?
In most cases, no.
How much longer does it take to grow comparatively to their full size?
Generally, we expect that a smaller tree planted bare root is going to outperform a slightly larger ball and burlap tree planted at the same time.
So they'll grow faster?
That is the expectation. They're definitely not going to be growing slower. That's, of course, the expectation based on experience of people that I've talked to.
Trustee Menta?
Yeah, I think it sounds great, and I'm really glad that you guys have looked at it and looked for ways to do things more efficiently and better for the village. The only thing I would ask is that you kind of keep track and monitor the survival rate of the bare root trees, and sort of so we do have some ability to, in a 5-year period, compare and really see, are they surviving better, are they growing faster, and have some ability to compare the burlap versus the bare roots. So we'll just keep some data so we can look.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah, and going on that, the only reason I asked about how fast they grow is the environmental impacts of a large canopy actually are significant for me in my mind. And so the faster they grow, I just wasn't sure, so I'd be interested to make sure, track it to say, are they growing as fast as the canopy, getting as big as fast? Because that also has not only the cost benefits, but environmental benefits as well. I saw in the memo that, I have 2 questions. I saw in the memo that you bought additional EAP injection equipment. Is that to ramp up for more injections or faster, or what was the purpose of that in the memo?
So our older, I guess to lay a foundation for that, the EAB chemical is injected into the tree by a specialized gun that uses air pressure, like little air tanks, to push the chemical into the tree, into a void that we drill into the tree, at which point the tree takes it up. Our old system was purchased used and I believe it was in 2009. It was purchased used, I believe, for the city of Milwaukee in 2009. So that was the first generation of this equipment. It was slightly less efficient. We noticed that we were having a lot of downtime related to the gun itself failing because a lot of the components are very old. But the big factor was that these air tanks, they're like scuba tanks or paintball tanks, so they have to be recertified every 5 years or so. Our tanks were at such an age that they needed to be recertified again, and we were looking at spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars to have each of these tanks recertified before they could be legally refilled. And so the age of the old equipment combined with the cost to keep it going, the constant downtime, and since we had got the first gun, there have been some advancements in the technology. The newer guns have fewer moving parts. The parts are readily available. There's a lot less cleaning involved, and the way that the system works wastes less air.
And then you bought 2, You actually increased the amount of guns you have, right?
So we were able to use the old gun, the old equipment for this year, and then we purchased a new gun this year, and we were able to run 2 crews. Running 2 crews during the prime time of the year, when the trees are really taking the chemical, was a major factor in allowing us to get that work done very quickly. Injecting is a time-sensitive thing. If we're able to do that in late May and June and into early July, it's a quick process, it's an easy process, and we get better results.
So we might have to take down less trees.
Well, we're able to keep the EAB under control in a larger number of trees dependably in a given year. Whether that translates into, I guess we'll see what the recommendations of the EAB plan suggest. But what it does is allows us to get that work done quickly and more efficiently and better results.
Thank you. My last question was, you said equipment may not be needed now that we have the stick tree, the trees with the sticks rather than the ball. There's less equipment needed, or, I wrote it down after you said it.
He said it's easier on the equipment,
Okay.
the trees are lighter, it doesn't require as much maneuvering and lifting.
Okay. Okay, same equipment though.
Yeah, we'd be using the same equipment just in a different way. Traditionally with the ball and burlap trees, we were able to carry just a couple of trees to the planting site of the tractor. Now we'd be able to throw 12 to 15 trees in the back of a pickup truck and then just use the tractor to excavate the hole. It's just going to be a lot less wear and tear on the equipment.
Just fine.
Are you gonna catch up on, you didn't plant this year, 2020?
No.
Are you gonna catch up on those and do 2020?
No. And that was
We've lost a year.
the other takeaway I wanted to make sure that you understood. So we've removed to this point about 125 trees that in a normal year, we would have attempted to replace and plant this year.
Mhm.
But you're saying you'd fall behind anyways, just because of the, right?
No.
In a normal year, no?
No.
You replace all.
So normally, we would replace everything that we removed, unless it was a late removal and the order had already come in. Ben and the forestry staff have identified and are estimating that we will probably, over the course of the winter and into next planting season, there'll be about a similar number of trees that will need to be removed.
Mhm.
We do have a confirmed, as you know, emerald ash presence in the village and are starting to see in the trees that have not been treated, ash dying. We will not be able to plant 250 trees next year, so it's going to take us a couple of years to get back into the expectation that residents have that if a tree comes down, it's removed the immediate following planting season.
Is it possible you might have less to remove with the more injections that are work quicker and faster or better?
No,
Maybe- No?
no, the trees that we're seeing die are the trees that have never been treated because they haven't met the criteria to be treated.
Yeah, we have not had to remove a tree and because of ash borer at this
Because
point.
you're treating.
Right. Typically, a removal is done for other reasons, up until now, unrelated to ash borer.
Unless we have a street project, right? We take down all the ash trees,
We take down the ash.
ash trees.
Not all of them. We take some down that meet the set criteria.
When we look,
So we're estimating, at this point, it's going to be at least 2 years for us to get caught up. And that will then depend after that point, what the rate of removals, the required removals is. If we do see if we get hit hard by the borer in the trees that are not being treated, that number may increase. But as of now, we're expecting a 2 to 3 year catch-up period.
And is that including, I'm sorry, but you had mentioned that it's going to be significantly faster if we go to the stick growing trees, right? You can transport 12 at a time rather than 5 or whatever the numbers were, but wouldn't that help us catch up because it's going to be a faster operation?
It will help us catch up. If we were to try and replant those as bald and burlap trees, it would be multiple years more for us to get caught.
process is six.
So it's the bare root that will allow us to get caught up in that period of time.
Can I ask that we move on to the next
Right.
item? This has been very informative.
Yeah,
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Do we need a motion?
Can I eat the kale at
We're party update.
You're eating, you foraging over?
That kale at River Park,
Oh, is
is
it?
it edible?
That's
All
the
right,
same
so our
kale we buy in
next,
store.
order of business, I guess, or citizens to be heard on the agenda. Is there any citizen in the audience that would like to be heard on an agenda item or a non-agenda item tonight? Okay, seeing none, if you do want to, next time we have sign sheets outside, just remember to sign up. Our next agenda item is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve and any removals?
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by trustee Buckler, seconded by trustee Maher. Any removals?
H and I'd like to use.
One second.
Yes. H and I, any others?
I'll move C.
And is that all? Okay, so we have a motion to approve the agenda, a second, with the removals of C, H, and I. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll now take up item 6C, consider committee of the whole and village board meeting minutes, September 3rd, 2019. Trustee Warren.
Yeah, this is very nitpicky, but on page 3, I'm referred to as trustee warrant.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Oh.
So,
Alright.
foreshadowing or what do you
It's
call it?
kind of a cool name, but I'll stick with warrant.
Was that it?
That was it,
All
that's all I
right.
had.
Any other adjustments to the minutes? Seeing,
I have
oh
one
yeah,
other,
trustee
and
Buckles.
it's also kind of nitpicky, but it's an item, I'm sorry, board reports. I don't have it with me, so trustee Carpenter's getting it here. But it said something along the lines that trustee Backhorst attended the annual meeting, but it's not the annual meeting. It was the annual board strategy meeting. No. And then, that's it, strategy meeting / retreat. Oh, okay, I just didn't want people to think that the annual meeting had already passed. Thank you.
Okay, any others? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of adopting? Oh yeah, I need a motion. Yep. I need a motion.
I move to adopt agenda item C with the changes made by trustees Warren and Bacchus.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by trustee Warren, second by trustee Maher. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll go to 6H. Consider application for special privilege for a raised camping bed within the public right-of-way at 3822 North Frederick Avenue. Important to note, staff is recommending not approval. Not approving.
I had gone by this and we've had some similar to this. This is, what hit me is this slope is really, it's not a sharp slope, it's gradual. No one else on the block has put in. It's a fairly large built block wall right on the sidewalk. So when the sidewalk needs to be removed, put in the forms, somehow this wall is going to have to be moved, and the dirt that's all piled up is going to come out of it when you have to disassemble the thing. So I'm a little concerned about, it's 4 feet into the public way. It's more about half the planters in the public way. And some other ones we've approved, like on Downer, where the house is right up almost, you gotta put in a wall to support the dirt up against the house. This is clearly, before it was just a slope with some flowers, now this whole like bunker structure's been built in the public way, so.
Can I just point out, if it wasn't pulled, would it have gone through as requiring removal? Rebecca?
requiring, or one point of clarification I
Okay,
would
because I
like
thought
to
that.
make, because this application was reviewed well into the week last week. Dr. Northrup had done some additional coordination with our Public Works Department. And they went to the extent of, Public Works had significant reservations regarding this area within the right-of-way. And so through more detailed discussions after our staff meeting and then some additional consultation and looking through the GIS and some of our utility logs, what they had reviewed is initially what was a large concern was backed off from the perspective that they verified that we did not have significant amounts of infrastructure under this wall in particular, which occurred at the very tail end of the week. And
After we did it.
correct.
Okay.
And then a second point, and this is just goes in general, and just something I'd like to cover with regards to special privilege permits. While we may grant them, it's very clearly noted within the scope of these agenda, or that when these permits are issued, that we as a village may have a need to access this area at any point in time, and we are not responsible, nor intend at any point in time to ever replace any infrastructure or private improvement within the right of way. So, Director Carpenter, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, so and perhaps this is the confusion that I'm picking up on. Initially, DPW did recommend that we have staff recommendation to deny it, and it was going to be a new item of business, but that has been modified because there was no utilities underneath there, so they were willing to accept its placement, subject to being very clear that if the sidewalk ever needed to be touched in that place, this would be removed and we would not put it back. So because there was no utilities under there,
They moved under their cost, correct? To move the wall, as Trustee Maher is saying, that it might be significant.
correct, the first attempt would be to tell them to get rid of it so we can get in there, but if we need to go in there quicker, we would need to remove it, it would cause delay and things like that, but yeah. So there was a modified thinking on this particular application based on there being no utilities underneath the wall. When there's been utilities in that location, we've always recommended denial. They did confirm there was nothing underneath there, so it was on the consent as approved with a lengthy stipulation that, it's very clear about that things removed.
Thank you. Trustee Maher, did you have more? Because I want to go on your comment.
I have a question.
Okay. Trustee Maher.
When you included all the photographs of similar properties that have plantings or structures in the 4-foot area, what was the point of including those?
That was submitted with the application.
Oh, okay.
Staff, yes, that was submitted as evidence of the application of why they thought they should be able to have.
Okay, I thought
this.
that, I
No.
thought we put that.
No, that's part of their application.
Um,
Because I don't know the location of all of these either. Some of them may or may not have
Right.
specific approvals.
Are you going to look into them all, make sure they all have permits?
They don't have locations on them,
Oh,
so
okay. We'll drive around and try to match up, like, I see that, match up. So my only concern here is, with the change in the recommendation, I thought I would have pulled it too. I agree with Trustee Maher in the sense that this is significant. And we do sidewalks every 10 years at least, if not more, depending if there's a crack or, a root or something like that, within the sidewalk, and someone complains or it's a hazard. So we've yet to deny something that since I've been on the board, that exists, and we just grant them a special permit and says, oh, too bad. And we've been saying every time, at least I've been hearing from various board members, including myself, we've got to figure out a way that people just don't ask for forgiveness. Like you've got to, this is a significant case in which you should have known it's 4 feet into the right of way, and that's a significant, you usually check, I mean, where your lot line is. And secondly, it's a mound of dirt, it's a retaining wall. And so for those reasons, I thought it was the opposite, but I will go ahead and vote against it because I think people shouldn't be able to build significant, impediments without asking, is there any restrictions? Trustee Buckerson and Menta.
So yeah, I do agree with you on my 3 terms serving on this board. We've had countless people come to us after the fact, or the village has somehow noticed that someone has built a retaining wall. I know this was mentioned as a raised bed. I live nearby this. Maybe there is some area that has dirt. I wouldn't exactly call this a raised bed. I would say it's more of a retaining wall and driveway delineator. But So yes, in the past, I don't recall ever having us deny any of these after the fact. Doesn't mean that we can't start, of course, going forward, but I think that the director was pretty clear about stating that there are no lines underneath. I don't know when the last time the sidewalk was replaced, but if it does need to be replaced, the owners will know that the village has every right to remove any of this structure and no responsibility at all for any of the architecture in the right way. So I know that we can, as a board, can sit and argue the different merits of, how high silver, what's gonna happen with that, but at the end of the day, they have an application, and it sounds like, after understanding that there aren't any utilities or stuff, that the planning department is not recommending that we deny this. So I kind of would trust them, to do their due diligence on this. And I don't want to get in the habit as a board of us, handpicking, oh, we think that wall's too high or this or that. If we have someone here, from our staff who is making a recommendation, I think it does carry a lot of weight with my decision making. However, to address the fact that we do have people asking for forgiveness instead of approval ahead of time, and I'm sorry I missed this in reading this, but do we charge a fee or anything like that? Or is there any kind of, so back in the day, if you didn't live up to your code compliancy, you didn't pull a permit ahead of time, then you tried to sell your house, they would come over and say, oh, you didn't pull a permit, so we're gonna charge our fees like 3 times or whatever. It was punitive, right? In some regards.
Yeah, based on the size of this wall, it did not require a permit. So if it would have been a more substantial wall, it would require a permit, then it would have been work without a permit fee.
But it's a
This is a special privilege, it's not a permit, I don't believe, but I did check with the building inspector as to whether or not this would have required a permit, and the answer was no. So had it been located on private property, they would not have needed to pull a permit for it. The only reason it's coming here is because it's located on village property, so the special privilege is the request that would be.
So there's no fee associated with the special privilege?
There is, but it's not, I'm not aware that it would be a triple fee for not having
I guess what I'm
applied
saying
for
is
it
that
before.
as a board, we could look at maybe tripling the fee.
I would have no issues with that, that would make sense.
During budget time.
So that is an alternative way to stop the forgiveness.
Sort of round out what I'm saying, but I don't feel at this point we should be unnecessarily punitive to just this one example when we have pretty much set precedents for allowing these type of things after the fact. But going forward, maybe as a board, we should look at it during budget or elsewise as far as a policy of how we deal with this.
Wait a minute, there was someone after you, right? Trustee, Amenta, and then
Is
trustee.
this property owner occupied, or is it an income property?
I don't have any, I don't know that, I'm sorry, I don't know.
And then my other question was, when this property is sold, is there gonna be something on the title or something to let the new property owner know that this is a non-conforming structure? And that they, because a new property owner may not realize, and then the village comes to a new property owner and says, you need to pay to get rid of this. I mean, I just think that new property owner should know that.
We don't record them on the title.
You don't record special
No.
privileges? Why is that? Because some of them are significant.
Well, it's the municipality's property as opposed to,
Which one
it's
is
not
most?
part of the private property.
But if there's stipulations that go along with that approval, the new property owner.
Well, would the new property owner be liable for the cost to
The
remove
insurance.
it?
They're liable.
Even though they didn't put it up, it's on our property and they didn't do it.
Correct, each of these is required to maintain insurance on an annual basis, so if we don't get the update that we have the insurance from them, we would send it to the new property owner. Now, how often we do that, I can't tell you because we
I
don't
didn't even
have.
know that without any.
You do?
But technically, this approval requires, these stipulations to have this every year. They need to provide us with insurance, therefore, they technically should be doing that. We do not have the manpower to be catching that
No,
and
of course not.
confirm that. It does appear the owner occupied based on the insurance documentation is here for what that's worth. But no, nothing is recorded on these onto the title.
Did we review something like that in plan commission one day, just, how this all works? Attorney Bear, did you have something and then?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify what 46618 specifically says about removal. It generally references that once a permit is granted under the ordinance,
A special privilege.
that it remains in effect. It says until such time as the village board orders the revocation of said permit. So for any reason, and then specifically under that, it says that the person waives absolutely any and all rights to claim, to make any claim with being associated with being ordered to remove it. But further than that, it also says for any reason, if the privilege, projection, or encroachment becomes out of repair, unsafe, or unsightly, in the opinion of the building inspector, they can order them to remove it, and if they don't, we can remove it and then charge it back to them as a special
What about the
charge.
need to repair the sidewalk? The same thing, or is that specific that's going into the language of the privilege
Well,
document?
if we had replaced the sidewalk, we now handle that as a special charge to the property owner as opposed to a general tax.
Right, so we just order removal and then remove it ourselves and tack it on.
Is there any implication on?
Condition number 6 says the petitioner must cooperate with and be responsive to the Shorewood Department of Public Works, so that DPW may efficiently complete tasks and activities related to cleaning and maintenance of the right-of-way. So it does require them to be responsible.
What would they have to do? Would it impact the physical sidewalk if this was removed? I mean, would it necessitate damaging the sidewalk?
DPW indicated that being so close, if they needed to replace that slab, they might need to have it moved.
We'll just charge it back.
For them, we can just charge it back.
It's not ideal, I think, was DPW's.
Trustee
Correct.
Kay, oh, sorry, and then Warren, and then Mark. Did you have something, Trustee Kay?
I was wondering if we could put this on further discussion as a future item to be considered, so that we might deal with that.
What is the future agenda item?
Seems like reviewing the policy or.
The plan commission, yeah. Okay.
I just want to say, I'm not going to belabor the point, but I agree with Trustee Bachhorst. I do appreciate the point that we want to pivot from asking for forgiveness to telling us before the fact. But given the fact that there's no lines underneath this, no water sewer maintenance, I'm comfortable with proceeding with the motion as set forth in the packet. I also agree that looking at the policy and making it more punitive, I think that's a good idea when we do have these requests after the fact, because it's not something you want to see come up time and time again.
Would plan commission have to review that before budget if we, as a board, wanted to say, we want to change that fee?
I don't think Plan Commission would have to. There's also an ordinance and a policy for what it's worth, so I'm not sure which, if we're talking ordinance, it's possible they can make a recommendation, but it's not required that the Plan Commission make a recommendation on something outside the zoning chapter.
Trustee Maher, and
You know,
then.
we have moved, at Edgewood and Frederick, there was a gentleman who was halfway through construction of a wall all the way around this property. We told him he had to move it back and had to deconstruct and move that wall back. We've also, in the past, when people have actually come in, has had to move far enough away from the sidewalk so you can actually replace the sidewalk. So I think at some point we need to actually start and try and enforce so people come to us before they build, so they don't build it right on top of the sidewalk, or they don't, so, you know, in the future, so maybe, we definitely should think about educational outreach as some component, that people are aware you should check where your property line is before you start planting close to the sidewalk,
Or building insurance.
fences,
Sure.
anything else.
Trustee Carpenter.
Yeah, my concern, especially in relation to this particular one, is really the maintenance. You know, with snow and ice, and I know that Attorney Baer was mentioning the maintenance issue, but you know, with young children, and I know that picture shows where this would come to on a young child. Like, I just have some concerns about the proximity to the sidewalk with that sharp corner. And some real concerns about that. And I think, you know, I think Trustee Bachhorst's idea is a great one to move forward with, but I just have some real concerns with the safety of this particular situation.
Thank you. Did Trustee Warren, did you have something?
Oh, no, I was just looking at the
Okay.
packet.
And I'll go to Trustee Carpenter's. I can't remember if I'm voting no or yes, but whatever. I think they should move it back. It's a structure that's right abutting our public right of way, and it will, even though it might not cause utility problems, we do have a sidewalk program, and we also have, snow maintenance, so, if they don't do it, then we have to do it, or at least in the past we did that, so I would want them to move it. Any other discussion? Trustee
I
Mata?
move to approve the application for special privilege for raised planting bed within the public right of way at 3822 North Frederick. Subject to plantings being no higher than 12 inches so as not to impede vision. The notation of the village will not be responsible for restoration should the area need to be excavated for street light repair, water sewer maintenance, sidewalk replacement, or any other required work.
Second.
And does that cover also, well, this ordinance covers, we can just tell them to take it out at any time, correct? Or whatever you just read, so
That's right.
we don't even need those provisions, we can just say take it out, but okay. All right, any other discussion?
Do you communicate with the owner once this is approved and explain the restoration?
Yes, so we do send a letter of
Okay.
the approval and or rejection of the application.
Do they know it's on the agenda today,
They do.
and they're not here?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, trustee Bachhorst?
I would just say if this does get approved tonight, that in that letter that you send to them, you might want to let them know that maybe next year we might not approve this or going forward, so that if there is the ability to move it back, or just to know that that might be a possibility, given some of the concerns expressed regarding snow and whatnot. I mean, we don't know if there's going to be a problem,
They
so
don't
I would
know.
hate to legislate on fear, but knowing next year we will have real data.
Do we, just a point of clarification, we don't review it every year? Once they're given a permit, that's it forever, until we tell them to remove it. So
Oh, no, we can tell them next year, we can tell them at any time to remove it.
we could, we just don't do, like the park. let's
Okay,
say.
fine, yes, we don't annually
Special
approve it,
privileges.
but we have an ongoing department that does look at things, so, and we have a lot of neighbors that will complain if there are issues.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Clarification for me, I didn't know if that motion also included referrings to the planning commission?
No.
It did not.
Okay. Can we do that without it being in the motion? Can the planning commission? look at
Someone else
Chauncey?
can make another motion.
Right.
I mean, I'd like to just vote on this one.
Yeah,
Oh, when do you
And
need?
then I'd like to move on. So,
and I'd like a bio break.
Okay, point of clarification, can the planning commission, we can still review it without the board having to refer, is that correct?
Review this application or review the
No,
ordinance?
Or the approach,
The approach, the policy, the.
Yeah, nothing's
Someone make a
stopping them.
motion, someone can make another motion.
you know?
I'm asking for clarification if we need one.
Or, was it second?
Yes. Yes, unless we amend it, but I think we can review it as a planning commission regardless, correct? Or do I need to make a motion, is what I'm asking?
The planning commission can ask for future items of consideration as well within their meeting, so if the plan commissioner wants to discuss it, I'd be happy to entertain that next plan commission for consideration.
Okay, then I think we don't need a motion. Any other discussion, seeing none, all those in favor, it was in support of the application, correct? Correct. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Nay. Motion- 3. So motion carries 4-3. Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is 6I, removed from the consent agenda. 6I, consider application for special privilege for an end roof along the west side of North Wilson Drive submitted by Rabbi Dinan on behalf of Lake Park Synagogue. Yes, trustee. Oh, you want to elaborate? I apologize.
I'm sorry, I know we've got some long-winded individuals.
Okay. Okay, then no. I'm joking. All right, without that comment, we will take a bio break at 9:12 and be back by 9:20.
Yes.